What is up, nerds? It's the KBMOD Build Guide podcast. Something, whatever it's called. And we're here joined with Bob, X, and a special guest from Thermaltake. You're Bob's friend, right? Is that how we found out about you?
Friend,
Yep.
friend would be a pretty loose term, but yeah, sure.
Bob, introduce your buddy who you're trying to get free gear from.
Oh yeah. So this is Shannon. Shannon is all things at Thermaltake. He joined me on the panel that we had at PAX East. So we met through Steve from Newegg, who is an awesome dude, and spent some time together over the weekend. Learned a little bit. Learned a lot about Shannon's background and how much more hardware he has than anybody else in the entire world. And, so yeah,
Disgusting.
yeah.
All
I don't know,
right.
Shannon, is there anything else you want to add? Like, do you want to tell people, do you want to start off and tell people what you do at Thermaltake?
Yeah, hey, basically I'm the marketing manager for Thermaltake, and I also probably should look at the camera.
Okay, you don't have to.
I also tend to do a lot of things. I work with some of our design team for some of the really cool stuff we make, some of the new things you see coming out. I also do pretty much anything else we need, just to bring awesome products to people. And I also overclock and do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yes, professional overclocker in the house, so save those questions.
He can help me overclock my 4790K. That's still at stock speeds, I think. That makes Bob upset.
That does make me upset.
Yeah,
And I have a water cooler, too.
What kind of water cooler?
It's the, crap, I should know the name. I think it's,
Do you have an H100i?
no, it's the Water 3 by, I can't think of the name.
Jesus Christ. I hate you people. I hate you people already.
No, it's Thermaltake.
BillsWaterCooling.com provided his closed loop cooler.
No, I'm pretty sure it's, isn't
Yeah.
that your
It's
water
Water
cooler?
3.0.
If it's Water 3.0, yes, it's ours.
Yes, I know. I
And
was,
at this point, I can't tell if you're trolling or not. So
for a second, I couldn't think, I'll be honest, I couldn't think of who made it. And then I realized, wait, I have the rep on here. So I just decided to screw with you. No, it's the Thermaltake
that's-
Water
that's
3.0. And it's doing a wonderful job at keeping it at stock speed. So thank you for that.
I would really hope so, because if it doesn't do that, then we've got a lot of work to do.
All right, so we're a little bit less structured than we were last month with this, just due to time restrictions, go figure. And so this might be a little bit looser than last month, but who's going to kick off the $500 build?
You want me to do that one again? That
Sure.
one was kind of painful. Again, did not get to squeeze that GTX 960 in it, but are you going to share the screen?
Yep.
Mark? Okay, cool. Let me know when we're ready to go.
You
with
just
that,
you
'cause
kick into it and all.
I can't see. Okay, so again, this is pretty similar to the build last month. Very minimal change here, actually. I think the only thing that I did was swap in a Radeon R9 280 3 gig because it's on a huge promo from Newegg. So we've got a Core i3 4150, got an MSI Z97 board, so it gives you a little bit of upgradability. G-Skill Aries Series 8 gigs. Seagate Barracuda 1 terabyte, 7200 RPM. Again, last week we talked a little bit about brand preference and price and all of that kind of stuff. Some people may not like the Seagate drive, but I found that to be a solid drive over the years and at a good price there. And we've got a Thermaltake case in there, which is a very good deal this month. I think it was as well last time. This is the VL8001 W2Z. That needs a cool name, Shannon.
Yeah, that's not the product name.
Thank you, PC Firepicker. What is it?
Good job.
What was that one? All right, anyway. And then there's another good deal on an EVGA 500 watt. So it's overkill for that build, but it'll do well, suit you well for some upgradability. So as always, the $500 build is tough. That one came in at $490 and 29 cents after all rebates, incentive, promos, etc. So.
But I mean, it's not a bad start, especially if you're on a budget. So
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's more than capable. I think you're gonna have a good time with pretty much any DX11 game. I mean, the R9 280, that's a pretty capable card.
mm-hmm.
Where does that actually slot in? That's like basically a 7970, not the gigahertz edition. Is that right?
The 280 would be 7870,
78. Okay.
7870 or 7850. But honestly, I mean, with that, you can run most games like mid graphics. I mean, at 1080, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're trying to do. I mean, obviously, if it's a brand new AAA title, you're probably going to have a rough go at it. But for the most part, if you're just trying to play, that's actually an overkill card from what most people play, like League of Legends or Dota. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, with 3 gigs of VRAM, actually, you might have a decent time even with like GTA 5.
Yeah, I think it
So-
would be fine. I mean, you're not going to run
Wait,
it
Teddy.
on Ultra or anything, but
you said
wonder-
you said 280, right?
280. Yeah, I think that's actually
Yeah, that would be
like-
7950.
so-
Yeah.
Okay. So
I mean, that's a hell of a PC for $500. The case is nice. The power supply, I mean, 500 watts should get you through if you upgrade the card. Since everything is so power, like we're not in
Yeah.
the days where everything you needed a 1200 watt power supply anymore, so that's good. And you can swap out the chip, throw in some more RAM and an
you're
SSD.
Shannon. You don't need a 1200 watt unless you're Shannon. We'll get to that later. Just
Yeah.
wait.
Well,
everybody.
you're running AMD, so you got to give more amperage to
Yeah.
that.
That's very true. That's very true. And again, we're sticking with Intel mainly because, like Mark said, you can easily have an upgrade path from that
Mhm.
i3 to an i7 if you save up for it. It's a good deal at SuperBiz right now for $93 still.
Yeah. Bang for buck, this is pretty solid.
Yeah, I think so.
So would you say the CPU is probably your biggest bottleneck on this build?
Actually, I don't even think that's even much of a bottleneck. I mean, it's a dual core but 4-thread
True.
processor, 3.5 gigahertz, and then it also turbos up to like 3.9, I think.
I mean, you're not going to
Yeah,
be
you're-
streaming on it, but if you're just
Right,
playing
right.
games, doing like one thing at a time, sure, why not?
Yeah, lower cache amount and stuff, you might run into a small bottleneck depending on where you're at. But for the most part, I mean, for gaming, if you're just gaming with no crazy multitasking, you should be fine.
Hey, actually, Shannon, have you done any like B clock overclocking?
Yeah.
Like some of these locked chips.
Yeah, it actually opens up quite a bit because you're with your base clock, you're opening up all of the frequencies. So it's basically all your buses are tied. It's not like the old days like P45 where you had PCIe clock, everything separate. So when you crank it up, you're cranking everything up. So that's also the reason why it's limited as well. There's only so far you can go before stuff starts to crash. That's why they started making the different dividers so you can actually jump your B clock higher. But even then, 125 B clock divider is usually, without going nuts, is usually about the highest you're going to go on one of these chips before you really start to push stability concerns.
Okay. But there is a little bit of overclock potential there. What's funny is though, a lot of people when they do our builds, they'll buy the K part and then they don't overclock it. Mark Miguel.
Sorry.
So
Bye.
I mean, but there is that little bit of potential there too. So that's nice to know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But even the unlock parts, I mean, most chips nowadays with the speeds they have and how efficient they are, you don't necessarily need to overclock them. It's more guys like us that just want to push it because you can.
Yeah.
That's
I
usually
haven't-
where that comes from.
Yeah, I haven't really ran into a thing where I needed to. I mean, I might pretty soon now that I finally have all my stuff laid out how I want it to. My PC I'm happy with because I've run out of things to buy, except for maybe more SSDs, but I think it has
Get
3
that
in there.
750 SSD.
Yeah, well, I'll talk with my brother-in-law about that. But no, I need to start actually diving into that. I think I tried once, but the settings didn't stick or something, and I was just like, whatever, I'm gonna play games. So
All right, so let's roll on to the $800 build, which I could do again if you like.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right, so $800 build this month. Very little changes from last month, actually. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly what, but we've got an i5 4690K. We've got the MSI Z97S SLI Crate Edition, which is a really good board and has some really nice aesthetics too.
It's a great looking board.
Shannon and I were, actually Shannon was telling everybody on the cast here earlier how good it looked. You've seen it in person, I've not, right? So
Oh no, it's a sick color scheme for basically. I mean, black and red is normally the colored build everyone's done, but that's obviously been done 100 times. Seeing black and white's really sick because it's just an awesome offset because it just jumps out.
yeah, we actually gave away a white build for our Extra Life efforts last year, and that was one easily. I don't know. I can try to find a picture of that. Maybe we'll share it later.
Man,
That
that
white
was
build.
sexy.
I like that build so much.
Paul and Steve and the rest of the Newegg TV crew got Jenny as well. Got that one together for us, and that was one of the prettiest builds I've ever seen. But it was a black and white scheme, so I really like seeing people play with different things other than black and red, like you said. So again, we stick with the G Skill Aries series RAM. It's good, solid buy right now, a good deal. Same Seagate Barracuda, 1 terabyte. It's a solid drive. What can I say? We did squeeze in a GTX 970, so that's a pretty big jump there. We've got R9 280 to a GTX 970 and just a $300 build change, right? So that's pretty massive, and that is a very good card right there.
Yeah, that's the card you and I both use.
No, it's not quite the same. Clock's a little bit lower. That's the WindForce 3X version. You and I both have the G1 Gaming.
We have the G1, that's right.
Which is a little more expensive, but it's just clocked a little higher. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same thing. I think the shroud is different. There's some LEDs on ours. But anyway, the NZXT Source 210, that's a solid case at that price. Cases are always an aesthetic, I mean, there's obviously going to be some cable routing and everything that's a little specific to each build. A lot of people have had success with that particular one, so that's why we went with that. And then again, that EVGA 500 watt.
Yeah, so I mean, that case is probably where the first place you want to cut for this build, just to squeeze it in, because you got it in there close, 796.52. That's about as close as you're going to get with this stuff. It's really hard to get the last few dollars out of it.
And with chassis, there's a lot of options. I mean, a lot of it comes down to what you want to see as visually. I mean, you may like the design of it, and I know a lot of people like that one. No drive bays up the front, just looks super clean. So a lot of people really are down with that, and that's really cool. But I mean, the problem is if you cut that, if you make the wrong compromise in chassis, you can also really hurt your capability as far as fitment and even possibly how your build's going to look in the end if you don't have really good, like Bob was saying, really good cable routing.
Yeah.
So my question, I guess, we made a big jump in GPU at this point from the R9 280 to the GTX 970. Amazing jump in GPU capability, but as a result, there's no SSD in this build.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, we've talked about how we focus on like pure gaming performance. Okay, your load times are probably going to suck, comparable to an SSD build, but I think for pure gaming experience, the 970 is probably preferable over to trying to shove in like a 250 gig SSD in place of that and keeping that R9 280. That's just a personal preference.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, though.
I would probably start with this, and then what I would do, I talked about previously, I'd maybe add an SSD and do Intel Rapid Start, like SSD cache. Maybe some other people wouldn't do that, or maybe they'd reinstall Windows on a different drive or install their games to a different drive.
You could do that too.
All possible. But
I guess my thought process was, at 800, this is a solid build, and I really like this build a lot. I'm curious if maybe you would go smaller storage drive, maybe a smaller boot drive, and then maybe like a GTX 960, the new 4 gig edition, that could possibly do GTA 5 at 60 frames at 1080p, still give you that balance plus load times for your operating system. It's all preference at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think when you're looking at a 970 at 298 on that deal from Newegg, that's a $54 promo. Okay, and there's it's 10% off and a $20 mail rebate, so that's a crazy deal right now, and it ends on the 30th. So if somebody's looking for 970, go buy that one. I think when your proposition is a 970 at $300 or 960 and some SSD under $100 at the same price point, I'd probably pick the 970 and then add an SSD later. That's just me.
You could do that, but also WD launched recently their new series of hybrid drives that I've actually had the unique pleasure of testing, and they are actually really, really good. They've done really well, like with OS installs and basically making so the OS boots faster. Obviously, your games aren't going to load super fast because it's a black drive with like I think it's a 16 gig NAND flash. And so but it does really nice at making the OS boot faster and just overall a snappier experience. And that's something that's a compromise because the price is not huge.
Right.
When you're talking, and so if you're talking about you have to make that compromise with dollars, that's something that could even be an option is something like that. I mean, obviously it's going to push your budget a little bit, but not as bad as buying like a separate SSD and a hard drive.
Sure.
Right, and it's less complicated too. I mean, we actually talked about that on the panel that Shannon and I did. We were looking at some Seagate drives at the time, Seagate fiber drives, and it's a pretty good solution for somebody who's not comfortable either adding drives later or configuring something like Intel Rapid Start. So,
or even worse, configuring a main SSD boot drive and then figuring out how to route stuff all to the second drive. It just gives you one drive and it just plugs in and works.
Right.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
The beauty of this, though, I mean, before we move on to the next one, though, is having an extra 1 terabyte drive lying around is always good for media and stuff. I mean, if you don't care about speed, you can throw all your music on there, watch videos and whatnot. It's always good to have media drives, and then you eventually, like we did with the $500 build, you throw in an SSD, you get a new Windows install, which is always nice, and you still have a 970, so.
Sure.
Yep.
But
Shannon's
each
showing off more.
their own.
I mean, DX12 is going to make things really weird too. So people who had maybe bought a GTX 960 up front and then added another GTX 960 later actually might be in a better position.
I would really like to
It's gonna
see
be weird.
real world numbers on that before
Yeah.
we say, hey, this is a viable option.
Well, and it's something too that developers have to integrate into their code. So it's not like something that's going to be natively adopted. It's going to be whether a developer has the cycles to
Sure.
do that.
Oh, absolutely. And that magical promise of like, hey, if you have like two 970s or like a 970 and like a 9800 GT that just does like texture processing, like magically DX12 will make that all happen. When I see it happen in real life, I'll be comfortable recommending it as an actual option. But on theory craft alone, buy a single grade card off the bat.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
don't rely on future technology to fix. I needed to spend $50 less. Wait a week.
Yeah.
Well, never plan on hoping you're going to be able to upgrade, because what happens is I've seen actually where I've known people who have taken and bought a card and they're like, oh, I'll SLI it later, right? And then next thing you know, the card gets discontinued. They move to a new card, and right as they're about to go upgrade it, they've got to go hunting eBay or something, get no warranty, whatnot, just to find a card to match their old one or upgrade again. And it's like, at some point, you got to look at it and be, buy the card you want up front and call it a day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm actually afraid that's going to happen because I really like my my G1 edition of the 970, and the rumor is that in the May area we'll see the 980 Ti, hoping that drives the 970 prices down, and then I can buy a second one with this exact same card, but maybe Gigabyte discontinues the G1, and I'll have to hunt and peck for one.
Yeah.
But even then, you could use any 970. You don't necessarily have to have the exact same one. I know for people like us, you want to have exactly the same thing.
You can buy mine at full retail.
Fuck you, Bob.
That's what I was gonna say. Just buy Bob's, and then he can buy my 980, and then I can get one of the 780 Ti's.
Right.
A 780 Ti for the
Or,
cost
I mean,
of
980.
Wow.
Whatever.
Oh, downgrade. Nice.
Damn.
Anyways,
All right. You want to roll on to the $1,300 build?
sure.
Yeah.
Either one of you.
Well, I'll do this one. So for this bad boy, we have the i7 4790K. I actually have that in Christie's machine right next to me, solid CPU, along with the water cooler by, who is it again? Oh, Thermaltake,
Yeah.
that's right.
Those one guys, I remember.
this-
I like those guys. They're
No,
alright.
this is actually the first water cooler I've installed, and it was incredibly easy. I didn't have any issues with it. I actually ended up stripping a screw, but that's because I'm an idiot.
I remember how worried you were about that though, and I was like, "No, you got this." And then you said it was so easy after.
Yeah, it was easy. I mean, I remember back in the day, water cooling was kind of sketch, and I never did it back then because you had to do everything. But this is all closed looped, and it's easy. If you want to go this route, this is a fantastic water cooler. I haven't pushed it, but that's because I'm dumb. We have a gigabit board, the GA797X SLI. I actually don't know much about this board because Bob threw this build together, and I'm just now looking at this for the first time. So, Bob, if you want to give us details on that, you can go ahead and do that.
That's a really solid board, and again, it's brand preference. That was a good deal. It's SLI compatible, and that's something that we look for in the higher end builds. The less expensive one, like the $500 build, for example, you're not going to get SLI support because it's a certification that they have to pay for, and it's also a difference in like the PCI Express layout.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this one, it has SLI. So if you wanted to add another 970, as we've been talking about, which is down there, you'll see there's the same 970 that we had used in the previous build.
Mm-hmm. So then we also have, we jumped up to 16 gigs of DDR 1600 memory, Corsair Vengeance. I've never used them, but I'm sure they're perfectly fine.
That's actually what I use in my system, and they're fantastic RAM
so,
modules.
We also have the Samsung 850 EVO. That is 250 gigabytes or gigabytes. That's plenty for your OS and a bunch of games. You may have to monitor it with how big our games are on Steam now, and you may have to swap back and forth, but you'll be just fine with that. And then you also have a 3 terabyte Seagate Barracuda. So anything you don't care about speed, you can throw on there, and 3 terabytes will probably do most of you just fine. Followed by, we already covered the 970 and a Thermaltake Versa H35, which we can go into in a second. And then we have the Corsair. Did we have this in the previous build, the 850 watt?
No.
Okay.
We had the EVGA in the previous one. The Corsair RM 850 here is actually the same power supply that I have in my main machine.
It's fully modular too, which is, if you can afford a fully modular power supply, I never thought it was a big deal until I actually had one and went, oh, these are really nice.
Yeah.
Next build, I have an HX now, but next build RM.
But actually, if you have any details on this case that you wanted to go over, since you work for them, you can give us the deets on it. I'm not too familiar with it, but we did jump up quite a bit in price. So we went from like $40 case to a $70 case here. So what you get, if you're spending that extra $30, why would you do that? If someone's building a PC for the first time, what are they getting with that $30?
Well, the thing is, with like the Versa case, like you had highlighted, it's still a very mainstream case, but we integrated a lot of the features you saw in some of the newer LCS ready cases, like, being able to fit water coolers in the top and whatnot, and being able to have better cable management overall. Just a lot of the details we took from the really big new Core series that's like Bob, like you saw, like the Core X9, things like that.
We
took a lot of the stuff we learned with that, and we put it into a smaller, more value-based chassis so that you can get a good modular chassis, be able to rip the drive cages out if you want to or whatnot, and still get it at a pretty decent price point.
Yeah, and this is a really like super clean, minimalistic, utilitarian style that I personally value. Some people like the flashy stuff or the angular, like you, John, you like the Phantom case, and that's just
actually, I was just thinking about that as you said it. So I used the NZXT Phantom full tower crafted, and 2 years ago when I built the system, that was like the tits. It was I'm not going to shit on Shannon. I came from a Thermaltake Zazer armor from a million years ago. My wife bought me that case when I was still in high school, and it served me for several builds. It was a solid case. It's a great server case. It's got tons of drive bays. It's enormous. The airflow is fantastic. It has zero cable management because this was long before you thought about cable management. And it weighs about 40 pounds by itself. So like moving to this case, it was like, oh God, this whole new world of managing cables, and it's made of like a hybrid steel and has also plastic, and it's much easier to move around. So those are all great things, but it kind of looks like a transformer, and it also is, it sticks out. And I like the case, but the next time I build, I'd like to do something much more
understated,
low key. Yeah, not much more understated. I'd like to have a window again. I'd like to have something that's very clean lines, and this Thermaltake case fits right into that.
I mean, before you dive into the thing, I just was looking at the pictures, and what stuck out to me is that a magnetic cover on top? How does that work?
It's just it's a magnetic fan filter. It literally just covers so that when it gets dirty, you just pull it off the top, clean it off, and put it back. And it also has a basically slotted holes for mounting like your radiators or whatnot up top, and also in the front, like you saw, all the 5 1/4s are removable. But like you said, I mean, there are two different audiences. There's people that love like the Transformer-esque, really crazy designs.
Sure.
And there's also people that really, and also I've noticed with age, I used to love the really more extreme or gamer style cases. And now I've become a lot more simplistic when it comes to, I want something that looks nice, and not necessarily something that looks like it's gonna jump up and try to kill me. I want something that just looks like it's gonna be there.
Yeah, I agree. At this point, were I to do a completely scratch build, I want something very understated. With a window, maybe I could do something like my GPU that has the WindForce logo on it. I actually like some of the new RAM manufacturers starting to put LEDs on the RAM chips themselves. Just enough little flash to be like, hey, my computer's better than yours, motherfucker, that bought it from Dell. But not like, hey, mine's from Neptune. This is totally different. I would want something a little more understated.
Are these drive bays all toolless too? Because
yes, they are.
that's, I don't know. I'm always going back and forth on that, whether or not I want that. But every time I have to swap out a hard drive or put a new one in, and it's toolless, it takes me 5 minutes. And if it's not, I have to go find my screwdriver. And then I didn't put it where I was supposed to, and it ends up taking half an hour to do something that I would have been playing games and had a few games in by the time I was done. So, I mean, toolless, they're pretty nice.
We give both options. That's what's cool, is we still have screw holes there, so you can mount it. Because some people, they like toolless, but then let's say you want to carry it to a LAN party or you want to travel to an event, toolless is like the worst idea ever if you ever have to move your case anywhere. Right. Because all it takes is one sharp, jarring move, and next thing you know, that wonderful hard drive you spent all kinds of money on. I don't know how much was it in that build list, but now you're replacing it.
Yeah,
and that's not a fun day for you.
I also like that you can mount 4 SSDs on the other side of the panel too.
Yeah, that might have came from somewhere, but we wanted to make sure. The cool part is if you route all the cables that way. Let's say you run only SSDs. Literally, you can rip all the drive cages out, fill it with water cooling, and not have any drives at all in sight.
That's nice. So one of the other things, and Bob, I don't know, maybe you'll have a different philosophy on the configuration from this side of things than I do. If you're running a solid-state drive in a build like this where there's 16 gigs of RAM, the way that when you install Windows, it's going to provision your operating system is by default, it's going to create a 16 gigabyte page file on your C drive. That's taking up very precious solid-state space for games. When I build a system like this at this level, I take and go into properties and move that C drive to like your 1 terabyte or your 3 terabyte Barracuda drive. It shouldn't affect your performance at all. It's going to give you more solid-state space, and it's just a better configuration, especially when you are looking at games like Grand Theft Auto 5, which is a 60 gig install, or Arkham Knight, which is coming up at a 55 gig install. That's going to take a big hunk of your drive. So there's 16 gigs of page file space you're going to want to move to your magnetic disk on any of these builds if you go with a solid state drive, especially a smaller one.
Yeah, I do that myself.
Or you could just shut it off.
Yeah, well, okay, so I've done that.
At that much RAM, you technically can just turn your page file off.
You can, but there are some applications that actually look for a page file. Some stuff that I've used.
Yes, they do.
So I've had to turn it back on, but I just throw it on my terabyte drive and forget it.
Yeah. There are some programs that won't even run without a page file.
Yeah.
And Windows will warn you. It will say, like, hey, a lot of programs might want this page file to exist. So if you're thinking of turning it off, maybe you just move it somewhere else.
But yeah, if you have 16 gigs of RAM between page file and your hibernation, like hyberfill.sys, that is also 16 gigs. So you got to shut that off.
Right, which you will need a command prompt command for, but you can just Google the phrase "turn off hyperfile.sys" and it's power config /h:\off or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's no colon, but I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's dive into the next build.
Let's do the 1800, which is actually 17 cents off of the limit.
Oh, I did not even see that. Hex, you wanna cover that? That is so close. Jesus.
Yeah, this is as close as you can get. So for the $1,800 build, we're gonna jump up to the X99 platform again, like we did last month. We're gonna go with an i7-5820K. That's a hex core processor, 6 core, 12 threads. We're still using the Thermaltake. I'm sorry.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
We're going to still use the Thermaltake Water 3.0 Extreme Cooler, the closed-loop cooler for your CPU. We've got a Gigabyte GA X99 UD3 ATX motherboard. 16 gigs of Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 at 2666. We've got a Samsung 850 EVO Series 250 gig solid state drive. Excuse me. We're on a 2 terabyte Western Digital Black Series HDD for your various game installs, your scratch space for your Premiere and Photoshop. We're bumping from the 970 up to the 980, the WindForce 3X from Gigabyte, great card. And we've moved to the NZXT H440 mid-tower case, and we're still using the Corsair RM 850 watt fully modular power supply. And it's going to clock in at 1799.83. So we are cutting as close as you can possibly get to that $1,800 build limit.
Yeah.
This is literally as much money as you can possibly spend on an $1,800 rig without going over $1,800.
Yeah, Bob's making me eat my words from earlier. So usually you only can get within $2 or $3, and then I didn't see this. He did a good job building this one.
17 cents. That's where he's at.
Yeah.
So this one, very little changes actually from last month. We changed from the NZXT X31 all-in-one cooler to the Thermaltake actually because it is a better product. This isn't a nod just to. Hold on, I'll wait till he puts his headset on. Welcome back. So what I was just saying, this build changed very little from last month, and actually one of the changes that I made was the NZXT X31 Kraken. I swapped that out for your Thermaltake Water 3.0 Extreme. And it's not just a nod to you being on the cast. It's actually because this is a better product in my opinion, and it's actually at a really good deal right now on Amazon for $94.99. So there's that. We're sticking with the NZXT H440 because I'm in love with that case, and I keep trying to stop myself from buying it. I almost bought it at Micro Center. I was so close. Almost bought it. They didn't have a white one. They only had a black one, so didn't buy it.
Wait a minute. This was the one that I was talking about with the no drive bays on the front. This is the one that's super clean on the front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, Capstar built this. The last month version of this, he swapped out the 980 for the 780 Ti that he bought from a friend Adam, and he put it together, and it's pretty. It's really pretty. I'm a big fan of that case. Like I said, I like clean lines. I like utilitarian, and that one, like it even has a power supply shroud on the bottom. I don't know if you already showed that, Mark, but yeah,
I'm showing pictures of it right now.
It's got this shroud at the bottom with the NZXT logo. And all those drive bays can pop out. You can mount drives on the back of the tray as well. So, yep.
Yeah, that's pretty sexy. Ooh, the red and black one is.
And there's
Pretty
not really a better way to spend $1,800 at this point. 17 cents is your buffer room right now. So
Yeah. Yep. So
Yeah,
we'll ask Capsar about his experience about a month and give you guys some feedback because it's basically the exact same thing he just built. I think Kanon helped him build it. So, sorry, Shannon, go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I mean, overall, this one's actually received some pretty damn good feedback because when it comes down to it, I mean, it just works. It delivers. I mean, it delivers a clean aesthetic, something that we are presently also working on improving. And so, we'll have something for you here pretty soon, Bob.
All right, you have my address, so.
Oh, I do.
You can tape the Titan inside.
There we go.
Very, very
There
well.
we go.
All right. So that's the $1,800 build, and that's the end of our typical builds. What we actually asked Shannon to do, we gave him an extra $1,000 to do a $2,800 build. So he's going to go through that, and then we're going to go through his personal build that's going to make everyone cry. So
Well, you set me up for this one, didn't you?
well, do you want us to go through the part list, or do you want to go through the part list?
I'm okay too if you want me to.
Okay,
That's fine.
yeah,
Go ahead.
absolutely. Yeah, I'll link it in chat here.
Okay. Now I don't know. I mean, since you guys are kind of controlling what's shown on screen, I
Yep.
guess you'll just have to follow along with what I'm saying.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
go for it.
Okay. But basically, starting off, obviously, we want a full 40-lane processor because when you're running with this kind of budget, obviously you're leaving yourself room to do other stuff. But 5930K means you're getting a good 6-core proc X99 platform. It's going to be 3.5 gig, and it's going to have the full 40 lanes versus a 5820K where you're limited to, I think, 26, 28 lanes. So that could be something when you're running, especially if you're planning on running multiple cards, which is one of the things I think is very important for X99 is it's a high-end desktop platform. It's made for running a bunch of cards. So When it comes down to it, then you got cooling it, Water 3.0 Ultimate. It's a 3x120 radiator. So it's probably, in my opinion, one of the best AIO coolers you can get as far as performance, and we also make it. So, of course, I'm going to have to say it's one of the best. For motherboards, I did Asus X99 Deluxe because, once again, black and white aesthetic. It just looks like a sick board. I actually have one. It's very awesome. It's on my test bench, actually. It's a beautiful board. Has three connector or triple connector 3T3R wireless AC, super strong performance, same as I have on the Rampage 5 Extreme. So really good. And just, 8 DIMM slots, you can run like over 128 gigs plus of RAM on it if you can get 16 gig DIMMs under $1,000. But Crucial
USB
Ballistics
3 ports are on that board.
you
Looked
know
like
what?
10 from the shot that
Lots.
Marcus threw
There's
out.
a lot. There is a lot.
Insane.
Because they run hubs on it. They run hubs, so basically
Okay.
the native PCH is actually split out. Crucial Ballistic Sport, I had to compromise here because Bob was being anal about price, and he couldn't handle. Bob could not handle me being $30 over the budget. I mean,
Nope.
$2,800, $2,800. You can't
Them's
give
the
up
rules.
Starbucks for a couple days. Sorry, I mean.
The rules are the rules.
Personally, I would go higher, but okay, Crucial Ballistic Sport, I was going to go with something like the Elite Series, but if you got to pinch those few pennies, the 32 gig kit, 2400 memory, it's going to give you good
Pinching pennies at
performance,
2800.
and you can punch Bob later for making me pinch pennies there. For SSDs, one of the better ones I've used, obviously the newer Phison drives, like the new Kingston Fury, are pretty solid as well. But SanDisk Ultra 2, 240 gigs means you're going to have a lot of space for games and whatnot. Really fast, solid quality drive means you don't have to worry about it in the long run. It'll have a nice, good warranty to it, and also it's just good reliability, so you don't have to worry too much. It's like $80, I think. It's ridiculous how cheap it is, but you know what? You can fit a lot on there. And then you got a WD 2 terabyte black, which I know I'm probably going to get crucified for since you guys recommend Seagate for the price.
No, not at all.
But-
Those are still great drives.
I mean, they're more expensive, but at the end of the day, the reason I held mine up earlier is I have a bunch sitting under my desk, and they are literally, I've used them forever and never had a problem. So that's why I use them. And then dual GTX 980s from EVGA, because they were basically the cheapest ones. Because when it comes down to it, a GPU is a GPU. You're playing the silicon lottery. Overclockability, whatnot, that all goes out the window unless you're talking a custom-built PCB and a purpose-built card with bin chips. For the most part, you're just getting a card that passed their muster as far as what they're binning it at clock speed-wise. And then, obviously, I got to plug more of my stuff because, first of all, I worked with the team to make sure this stuff happens, so I want to make sure that, because, like, for instance, water cooling fitment, Thermaltake Core V51. The chassis will fit dual 360 rads. It'll fit even bigger. It'll fit tons of cooling. It still has a clean aesthetic to it. Has some cool perforated panels, all kinds of cool removable ventilation, filtration. Basically, as many fans as you could probably dream of, this thing's going to fit. Minus, of course, Bob, as you saw the X9, that fits a ton more, but that's another story. And then 850 watt fully modular tough power grand power supply, because it's a gold rated power supply. It's solid. It's fully modular. So for people who want to, if you're doing a $2,800 system, you're probably going to get some custom sleeve cables or something like that. Now you have the capability to either sleeve them yourself or add it or whatnot. Obviously, the thing is, like we talked about before we ever started the podcast here, and this is something I'm going to mention straight out. This is not a perfect list. It's more what I would build,
Right.
but there's a lot of flexibility. You could swap in power supplies or even graphics cards, depending on what you want to do. I'm more looking at dual 980s is pretty much going to blow away even like a current gen Titan X in most games. It's going to be really close, but it'll blow away in some of the benchmarks, or not even benchmarks, but more real world games. Dual 980s is going to do more for you. Unless you're
Okay,
talking
that's-
like, go ahead.
No, actually that's what I was going to ask. So looking at the price tag right now on the Titan X, you're looking around $1,100 for a Titan X, and you're looking at a little more like 1180-ish for the 290s that you've spec'd out at this point. Having used SLI previously, and I'm not having a ton of problems with it, but looking at someone who wants to maybe just go for broke and also wants none of the configuration issues that maybe SLI is going to give you inherently. Far Cry 4 is a great example. When it came out, SLI was borked. It just did not work well at all. And then
Some
two
games
patches
don't
later,
scale.
it was great.
Some games don't even scale. Not to mention, you don't get 100% scaling when you're talking, depending on the game, depending on drivers. A lot of that
Sure.
stuff makes a big difference. So
Mhm.
when it comes down to it, if you always go with the strongest card. But when you're talking about overall performance, as far as like I've tested 2-way, 3-way, 4-way 980s, I've tested 2-way, 3-way, 4-way Titan X, I've tested Titan Blacks and whatnot. And so I can say 2 980s is going to be very solid. However, we are seeing games start to tap the amount of VRAM available. I mean, perfect examples, GTA 5.
Yeah.
It actually tells you what it'll use. And when I first set it up on 2 980s, I couldn't enable everything maxed because it was like, yeah, you're using too much VRAM. And I'm like, you know what, screw you. I disabled the notification, figured the game was stupider than me, and well, it turns out I was wrong. when I started playing it, I hit certain points where that thing started chopping and going nuts. And then I realized once I backed it off, everything was perfect. And
Okay.
it runs great on 2 980s. But you have to understand where your compromises lie. Granted, that's only one game. But it's the same thing as like if you play GTA 4. That's one of the most CPU bound games you can find. So
Yeah.
if you're running an older like Pentium, the new Pentium Anniversary Edition, great gaming proc, really for like really budget gamers. But you put it in that game, it's going to fall apart, even
Sure.
though it's an old game.
So is this maybe a case where I know we talked previously about how DirectX 12 is coming and all the magical wonder that it's promising. This is a build that in my thought, if you're going to go with this specific build, it's a place where when DirectX 12 is in place, maybe you'll see that jump over a Titan X at about the same price tag because you're going to get we're being promised 8 gigs of VRAM at that point because it can combine the pool and
Yeah.
make 2 4 gig cards into an 8 gig card because of the way that the rendering works. Whereas right now, if you are using SLI 980s, you're going to get 4 gigs of VRAM max.
Yeah, because basically it's writing the same information to both frame buffers. So you're getting the same frames written to both cards at the same time. DX12 promises to do that. However, I treat anything like that as rumor until I see
Sure.
it actually come out and I can see it being used that way.
Yep.
Absolutely agreed.
Because the other problem is DX12. That's great. We're going to hear about it. But how many of you remember DX10 back when Crysis was around everything? Oh, DX10's the future. And how many years did it take games to actually start using it?
And then at that point, how many of them just jump straight over to DX11?
Or even more so, how many cards had you gone through at that point before it came around?
Right.
I mean, never plan on, oh, this technology is coming, so that's the card I'm going to buy because it's going to support it. Because by the time that support is fully implemented, you're probably going to be on something else.
Or even if it's something like, okay, you're looking at, hey, I want to play GTA 5 totally maxed out to the wall. Well, that game is written on DX11. So even if DX12 comes out and it does all the magical, glorious things that it does, that they say it's going to do, will Rockstar go back and say, hey, you know what, this API exists now, let's patch all that crap into this game that we designed around a totally different API?
I doubt it.
So, yeah, that's not going to happen.
It's an unnecessary expense for them, for them to take and say, hey, we're going to put our coders in charge of this task that's going to make us no money.
Right.
I mean, I don't know many companies that would do that. If they did it, hey, good on them. That's awesome. And they may do it. I'm not going to say they're not. But I would rather say, you know what, Titan X, 12 gigs of VRAM, you've got the memory there. It's all on one frame buffer.
Yep.
You're not dealing with any possible scaling, any possible game you come across that maybe just doesn't, or maybe it's an AMD optimized game and it doesn't scale well with SLI. You just don't know what the future can bring for a specific game. And if it's a title you like, that could be a crappy day for you.
Yeah. I think this really comes down to what kind of games you play, what kind of like for example, I think this particular build with the SLI is probably geared towards somebody who needs a ton of frames per second for like a first-person shooter, and maybe they don't care so much about the fidelity or the environment in itself. I mean, I'm sure you're going to get eye candy absolutely with 2 980s.
Yeah.
But you're not looking at some of those Skyrim mods that take up an insane amount of VRAM, or like you said, GTA 5 with all of the eye candy turned on.
Oh, yeah.
In that kind of scenario, maybe if that's the kind of stuff you play, then maybe a Titan is really the way you want to go.
I think the Titan is, if you're doing a lot of, like for me, a Titan makes more sense because I do a lot of video work and I've been doing a lot of 3D animation and whatnot. And it'll show one of the most used plugins for me in After Effects is Element 3D. It'll tell you in the little corner how much VRAM you're using. And before I upgraded cards and I had 2 gigs, I would max that out and it would chug. But if you stay within the window, it runs really well. So, and I've had really, well, at least what I thought were simple scenes, and it was using like 3 gigs of RAM. I'm like, dang. And that's
You got-
3
you got-
gigs for that.
Oh,
So-
you'd be surprised what can happen because some of those textures, like a good example is COD, Advanced Warfare. I don't know if you guys have looked at this. I've actually tested it, and there is some stuff I've run into where it's so, I don't want to say poorly optimized. That's really mean, but basically the game is set up in such a way that it preloads so many textures that I got it to use over 6.5 gigabytes of VRAM. Just because it was preloading so many textures for like
that's poor
the map
optimization.
it was loading. It was not set up to be optimized for people real world people who, run maybe 960s with 2 gigs per card.
Yeah, well, that game sucks anyway, so.
Absolutely. It's cool. You can shit on those games here. We do it all the time. It's fine.
Do you guys mind if I answer a question actually in chat? There's
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Actually,
By all
I-
means.
I was going to say we
K9
should
answered a
switch over
really
to
good question.
questions anyway. So if you have a question, throw it in chat. We'll try to get to it.
Well, there was a really cool one, which is how much difference would you see in 2 cards SLI between 5820K and 5930K with 16.8 or 1616? And I can tell you right now, I've tested cards down all the way to X1 and X4, which all you have to do is tape off the slot. You just tape off the actual bottom of the card where the pins are, and you can actually cut it down to X4, X1. I can tell you X1 and 980 runs like crap. It runs like garbage, but it still runs. But you knock a card down to X4 versus, like, let's say X8 or versus X16, dropping to X8, you lose maybe, depending on the application, 3 to 6%. So you're talking a few FPS at most. You're not talking a ton of performance. So in reality, going with a 5820K, if you know you're only going to be running like 2 cards, dude, it's an awesome option. Really good performing processor, really good cost savings. And now that they unlock the, like, you have 4820, 5820, when they unlock that lowest end SKU on the HE high-end desktop, they really opened up a lot of capability since they did the unlocked processor now. You can crank it up, turn up the multiplier, and just go nuts on it. And it gives you a ton of free performance.
I've actually always wondered that myself when SLI, because you always have it in the like times 16 slot, but then when you run SLI, it's always in the times 8, which that was always basically a CPU issue. Really,
Well, the second...
but
Well,
it's good. It's just good to know that it's that minimal of a performance loss.
The second card is actually lightly utilized. I tested it on just single card, just a single primary GPU, and started taping it off so that you physically only get the mechanical pins of like X4 or X8. X4, obviously, you take a decent hit. I saw like something, I think, 18 to 20% with X4,
Yeah,
but I
I'm
saw
just
only 6 to 8%. But even then, it's still very playable. When you're talking a card like a 980, if you're dropping it down to X8, you're losing, I mean, on a game like BF4, when you're talking SLI 980s, you're losing 1 to 4 FPS. I mean, that's nothing on something like a 980 running.
Yeah. It's a good
What
question.
you're saying there too is though that there is a significant amount of headroom available for future development on the X16 slot.
Oh,
At
absolutely.
PCIe 3.0. We've got plenty of bandwidth still available. We're not anywhere close to tapping that out.
No, you're not saturating that at all. I mean, I've tested the Titan Z on X8, and the X8 versus X16, the performance was not a massive hit. Obviously, it was a bit more than a single GPU card,
Sure.
but it wasn't horrible.
Okay. Awesome. So before we actually dive into questions, I asked Shannon to put together a PC part picker list of his personal machine that he is running right now.
Gross.
And you're all going to cry. So I'm going to link this
Gross.
in chat. Keep in mind that the Titan X's, the price for the Titan X's, not even included in the total. So,
those
his
are
RAM costs
finally-
as much as one of our build tiers.
So I'm going to suggest that you look, just scroll right to the bottom, look at the total, cry for a second, then scroll to the top and start looking through. And you'll feel a bit of my pain, not as much pain as I feel.
No, because Bob is better than all of you.
So
Seriously, his RAM costs as much as one of our fucking build tiers. So just brace yourselves here, people.
all right, so it's in chat, and hopefully I timed that well enough so that you guys know what is coming. But
Face and chest.
No, the cards are included in that.
Yeah, they are.
On the
Yeah,
one,
they are.
okay, the one I'm looking at, it doesn't even have a price for them.
Oh,
Someone
whoa,
in
it's
chat.
like-
1-800 web
oh,
slot. I
crap.
will take 3.
Yeah, no, it's like the item disappeared from PC Part Picker.
Yeah,
This
I think
is
it disappeared
absolutely
because it
insane.
had the price earlier. It was right around 20.
Okay, so according to the price history from April 20th. The last that card cost was $1114.98 for one.
That's what it showed earlier today.
Yeah.
So there's $3,000 in GPUs in there, folks. Just
So starting with the top, Shannon, what is your 5960X running at?
Oh, the one I'm talking to you on right now?
Yeah.
Holy
4.7.
crap!
So he's got a 5960X at 4.7.
I just saw the price. Sorry.
add 3K to that because
Now-
the price of the
now keep in mind-
GPUs isn't in there.
Keep in mind, while Shannon has done plenty of custom loop stuff, he's using his own Thermaltake Water 3.0 Ultimate, and that 5960X is at 4.7.
Yeah, no, I've actually had better chips that because I actually use that same cooler for binning before I overclock them, and I can tell you that cooler will run about a 5.1 chip no problem if you get one that's good enough for it.
Jesus.
That's
But-
insanity.
I mean, in reality, I'm waiting because we just, as you know, launched our custom liquid cooling. As soon as I get the parts I want in, which are going to be that big, massive radiator I was talking to you about, as soon as we start getting some of that in, my system build will be changing.
Well, whatever you don't need, just ship to us, and then
You have my
we'll play with it.
address.
It's fine.
All right, so he's also using an Asus Rampage 5 Extreme, which is a gorgeous board. I've seen one in person, and
That's a god tier mother
I
right there.
I can't afford it. I mean, if JJ from Asus wants to send me one, you also have my address, sir.
By the way,
Oh, he has another one in
I'm
box.
not lying. There's the box.
Oh, that was the box. That's not another one in the box.
No.
Okay, we'll go through your cave of wonders in a minute. We got 64 gigs of DDR4 2666, which is as
Obscene.
much
It's
as
obscene.
one of our builds. Okay.
I just realized that.
16 1 terabyte Crucial M550s, 4 terabyte Western Digital Blacks, 3 Asus GTX Titan X. At what was it? What's the price? 11 something?
It was like
it was
1100.
$1114.98. So there's
Sure.
add another like $3,500.
All right, so now all of this is shoved into the biggest case I've seen in my life, and Shannon actually designed it. And I want one, but I would have to put my desk on top of it, based off of how my basement's laid out right now.
I worked. I'll give a lot of credit. Honestly, my my headquarters team, the guys I was talking to just a little bit ago before the call, we have awesome designers out there. I just work with them. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. I'm able to provide design feedback and get some really cool stuff happening. I don't want to say like I did everything myself because that's really not cool.
Sure. No, okay. So significant feedback. We'll go with that. Sorry, I misspoke. But this case, honestly, I was joking with John before we even started. I was joking with X before we even started that his dogs could live in it comfortably, and they honestly could. The dimensions of this thing are just incredible. You take an EATX board and lay it horizontally, and that's the width of the case.
This is actually the playpen that Bob uses for his latest spawn.
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna
His
see
latest
if I can get one for Sam to sleep in because it's. But anyway, it can literally house as many radiators as you possibly can fit. I mean,
This case is a monster.
This
is not a LAN party case at all.
Well, I'll tell you right now. Remember you were complaining about your Zazer armor case you had?
Yeah, no, this is heavier than that.
This case dry is 44 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is. Oh. All right,
I'm not
gonna
joking.
need-
It's straight up. This thing on the box is 44 pounds before you touch it. It's 44 pounds walking out the door.
I mean, no lie, I would love to build a system in this, but it would never move from the place that I set it once it was built. Like, okay, you live
It's
here
not-
now.
Well, actually, we did put standard size holes, so you can go to like a Depot or whatever and get casters and put it on it.
Really? Oh, that's awesome.
So we did have that kind of forethought, but we also made it stackable, so you can make it even more crazy and unrealistic.
On casters, this would be like the envy of my office at work. They would just be like, "What is that? Why did you do this to a
It's so
computer? I
beautiful
don't
now."
understand."
But yeah, so it's a beast, and I personally love the design of it. And there are smaller ones. There's a micro ATX version and a mini ITX version.
Yeah,
Yes,
actually,
there is.
after
So-
you had done PAX, we talked about some of the stuff you got to see, including this case. And I am right with Bob. If there was a version of this case that you could put a regular PC and a streaming PC on the different tiers that are available and make it like, hey, here's your stream system in one beautiful box, I'd buy this case tomorrow. And I'd rebuild my Mac Pro in it. Like, I would figure out a way to make it happen.
That's why we make them stackable. You build your stream PC on top of it.
I want that right now.
I love it.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say my stream PC is a little mini ITX box, so
The only reason
it sits on top of it.
is that
Yeah.
Bob had one that he would sell me, and I needed one, so I bought it from Bob.
The Mac Pro, yeah. Yep. Okay, and let's see. You've also got the. Now you told me this is a power supply that's different than what's actually in your machine, because there's a product that we can't name yet. But that is a beast, 1475 watt, 80 plus gold certified semi-modular power supply in there too. And then we go on to the monitors that again are just obscene. A bunch of
Shannon
14.
has enough monitors to make me disgusted. Okay.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
yeah. Please show them, Shannon. Like, let's show them this.
Just monitors on monitors and monitors, and they're all what 1440p, and then there's the ROGs, the Swifts.
1440p G-Sync.
I just threw up in my mouth.
And there is a 24 port RAID card in there as well. So
Yeah,
So-
I think you
SSDs.
need it, considering there's that many hard drives in there.
yeah, and they all fit in that case, no problem. That's
Yeah, I
all.
actually wanted to ask you about that because on the PC part picker potential incompatibility issues, it says that you are going to need 11 additional 2.25 or 2.5 drive bays. Do you just use just brackets that stack multiple SSDs on top of each other? Like, are you using multiple
Yep.
4 SSD brackets or 2 SSD brackets?
I'm using multiple, and I might actually be suspending certain SSDs with things such as rubber bands.
Nice.
I mean, it works.
Okay, fair enough. Fair
You
enough.
gotta do what you gotta do.
It happens,
Ropes
but
a lot
hey,
of
you
saying
know what?
you're the final
Sometimes you
boss
gotta
of the
make things
internet.
work.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
no moving parts, so
Right.
who cares? It's not like you need to keep it cool. So
Basically, if you have a cool 20K laying around you don't know what to do with, this is the build guide for you.
So there's a bit of existential meltdown going on in chat right now, and yes, this is probably the most obscene build that I've ever seen. So congratulations, sir, you win.
yeah,
Especially if you're a viewer of KBMOD or you read the website. Usually once a year around Christmas time we do the dream build. Like if I had no limits whatsoever on what I was gonna build, this is what I would build. And it's usually like, here's $4,000 I spent
Yeah,
on a
no
computer.
kidding.
And
Yeah,
Shannon went, that's what I spent on video cards. Fuck you.
sometimes I like to brag that my computer is worth more than my car, which is a beater, but whatever, it's paid for, so I don't care. This is worth more than my nice car.
Yeah.
Yeah. This build could buy my first car when I started driving 17 times.
God.
What were you driving? Like a skateboard?
A 1995 Pontiac Grand Prix LE that had 90,000 miles on it when I was 18. So
That's
yeah.
actually an awesome car for when you were 18. I had to build my own car.
Well, I essentially rebuilt it because the gas tank was rotted out, none of the tires
Oh,
worked,
God.
and the engine was basically dead. So,
So you're
it was
one
not a
step
big
away.
flaw.
You're one step away from hamsters on a wheel. Then
Essentially, yeah. Although compared to your computer, my computer looks like hamsters on a wheel hoping to play Grand Theft Auto
Pretty much.
5.
Pretty much. So before we dive into questions in chat, actually, everybody in chat, if you want to go ahead and put your questions in chat, Shannon, can you show off some of the stuff that made me cry before we even started? Things that are for your test bench and not in regular use.
oh, the cards.
Yeah, the cards and the CPUs.
There's a Titan Z.
No, it's a Titan Black.
That's
Oh,
just
Titan Black. Okay.
Just
You know,
black. You know, there's a Z.
there's
a
the Z. Okay.
No.
Uh,
So guys, this is what you can aspire to. Shannon is a professional overclocker.
He's just got
And which
CPUs.
CPUs are those, Shannon?
He
Those
doesn't
are-
remember
those
their
are-
coasters.
50,
Those are-
5960X.
Yeah, those are 4 5960Xs that Shannon just has kind of kicking around.
They're all still working, right? You didn't kill any of those?
Those are the live ones.
And the ones in the box, are those the coffined ones that are dead?
No, those are the
Those are
Xeons.
the Xeons.
Oh, those
so,
are the Xeons with
So those
14
are-
cores and 28 threads that you will never touch as a human being.
yeah, they're like what, $2,400 a piece, something like that. Maybe
2400 by chip alone, 2700 if you want the heatsink that comes with them.
Good God.
I've got other stuff around here somewhere.
I'd imagine.
Oh, and here's my large Hadron
Yeah.
Collider that I
Yeah,
just
I'd imagine you do. Yeah, those are the SSDs.
your stack of SSDs.
Oh, so actually, you talked about the new Intel NVMe drives.
Oh
What do you
yeah,
what do you think
Intel
about those?
750s.
Are those actually worth it yet?
Well, see, the thing is, NVMe is very new, so it's going to cost you a ton of money for something that, I mean, let me ask you, as a user, Bob, you guys, what would you need it for? What benefit would it serve you versus the
feel
standard SATA 6 SSD you have now?
Honestly, I don't know that I'd notice the difference. I mean,
That's the point. Everyone thinks like, oh my God, I need this. Like back when SandForce came out, everyone's like, I need a SandForce drive because it does 550 and 490 on the right. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. It's all about response time. That's what you're going to see. You're going to see a very fast, instant response. You're not going to, I mean, unless you're writing huge sequential files all the time, you're not going to see that massive throughput. You're not going to see all these different things. Now, yes, I do believe viability. Like if you're doing content creation, if you're doing, video editing, things like that, where you're doing live view work, you're doing, you're loading up the memory and you're just doing everything. I could see that being a reality where, this is something that's viable for, someone like that. But in the end of the day, for end users, you're better off grabbing a couple nice drives. And I did see someone say something about, I would rather use, Samsung 850s or whatever. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm looking at what works best with my specific configuration. And that's, I mean, I could easily get like, probably some NVMe drives or whatever. But what's it really going to do for what I do? I'm loading up games on a bunch of SSDs and it loads it up and does everything the way I want it. And that's the same thing like with graphics cards. Do you need a Titan X? Probably not, depending on the game you're playing. Well,
Yes.
that's a dumb question to ask in this chat, but that's a very dumb question to ask.
So what you're saying
I
is
guess-
I'm justified in buying one, but Bob and Dan don't
not.
need one. So okay,
Absolutely, that's exactly what I
all
said.
right, that's fine. I'm cool with spending more money on computer.
see,
hardware.
I was going to take the I run virtual machines route. So I was gonna justify my purchase that way, but
I have
And
no
you know what?
excuse.
That's
I
the
have
thing.
literally no
That
excuse.
kind of drive would be awesome for you.
Okay.
A lot of the Intel PCIe drives are great for when you're running a ton of like
and
just stacked VMs, and when you're just going, when you're going through a ton of VMs and you're doing a lot of, or even like dynamic allocation of resources, things like that, where you've got to have a lot of I/O throughput. That's going to be a good idea for you, but for most people, it's not going to be. Even myself.
Yeah.
So for what my thought process is behind maybe buying one of those drives at this point is right now I'm using 4 crucial M4 128s in a RAID 0 array, and my configuration there is thinking, well, is ISRT really going to do trim in the way that it needs to do across a 4-disk RAID array, whereas I can get the same throughput that I get, like I get about a gigabit per second of sequential read and about 850 of sequential write with that ridiculous array that is super overkill for playing fucking Grand Theft Auto. But with with an Intel 750, you don't have to worry about the trim aspect of it. You get the throughput that you want. But with a drive like that, you're going to also run into boards that are like mine, where I'm on a Z77X that may or may not support NVMe booting. And that is also a problem you might run into.
Not to mention Z77, you also only have 2 SATA 6 ports.
Yeah,
So if you're rating those drives together, you're only running 2 SATA 2 ports and 2 SATA 6, which means you're limited to like about 250 megabytes a second approximately on the SATA 2 ports. So you're actually cutting your capability off of 2 of your drives.
Right. So I actually have 4 on my board, but 2 of them are on an Intel controller and 2 of them are on a Marvel controller, so you can actually RAID across them. So for a board or like my configuration where you have only the number of well, mine is actually a crapshoot either way. You only have 2 of the stated 6 gig ports, and there's a possibility that unless Gigabyte updates the BIOS, it doesn't support NVMe booting. So in my case, I really should just rebuild my system at this point. Don't tell
there
my
you
wife.
go.
Please don't tell my wife.
Just build a
I'm
new
gonna tell her.
computer.
No,
that's
no.
fine.
I'm texting her right now.
Do yourself a favor. Just accidentally spill your drink in the top of it and then go, oh no, it's fried. I've got to do something. I need this for work. Then you have a freebie, free pass to
Work.
Yeah, see,
Hey,
good
this
idea.
is work, right?
Sure, let's pretend this is work. That's what I tell her. This is work. It's not. This is me
Did-
dicking around with cool people about computer hardware.
Did I just hear Nikon like pour soda right into the top of his machine?
No, I think
He's
you
like,
heard his
bye-bye.
soundboard clapping.
He's got a soundboard.
There's no reason to play it now, though.
All right. So, do you guys want to go into some chat questions?
Yeah.
Let's see.
I
Yeah,
haven't,
who
I
in
haven't
chat
been
has some
looking
questions?
because I don't read chat because I'm bad. But do we have any good
Fuck
questions?
fans.
Skimming right now.
What was the question that everyone's responding with, save for 970?
Well, someone wants to know if Shannon runs the Matrix on his computer, and I think he probably could if he wanted to.
Are you the architect?
Yeah, I think he might be the architect.
So far as I will admit, I don't do anything like that.
Less the pro gaming 19 asks, I need a new graphics card. I have $300. What's the best bang for my buck? In my opinion, the 970.
970. It's not even
Without
a
a
question.
doubt.
Yeah.
970 is a solid card.
It's the best bang for buck you're gonna get right now.
Yeah.
How overkill is try SLI Titans? Have you seen anything yet that has even remotely challenged them?
No.
Nah, I don't think so.
No.
I would actually really like to see Project Cars, which supports 12K, on your monitor. I'll try SLI Titans.
I don't know if DSR even goes that high.
So, well, there's native support in Project Cars for 4K monitors at whatever 12K they're considering it.
Oh, I got you. Okay, I
Okay,
thought you
that
meant like
makes more
12K
sense.
It's like
display.
surround. Yeah.
Yeah, in a surround
Okay.
gaming platform. I think yours is
Okay.
maybe one of the few systems on the planet that could play it. So, I want to see that.
Yeah.
I was more thinking like you were talking like a single 12K display. I'm like, wow, I'm normally pretty up on tech, but that's
No,
a new
no.
one to me.
It's a lot of pixels.
Yeah, yeah. I've already seen DPI scaling issues on 4K with like Windows 8. I can only imagine 12K.
Oh yeah,
I'd have
need
icons
microscope.
the size of a pixel.
Yeah.
So we got a question about the viability of one of our $800 builds from last year.
Right.
And I'm actually going to look one up. While I'm doing that, actually, Shannon, could you talk a little bit about Thermaltake engaged in like esports stuff that you guys do? I know you do a lot of that. Thermaltake does a lot of that in like Asia. We had a question from one of our guys, Hutch, and he wants to know if you guys are going to be involved more in the U.S. esports scene as it's starting to expand.
Well, you know what the thing is, U.S. as a whole, they've had a tough time adopting esports as a serious thing, and that's been a tough one because everyone looks at sports as being sports. You carry a ball around. I mean, a perfect example was what's his face from ESPN just totally thrashing on the recent coverage of
Heart of the Dorm.
yeah, Heart of the yeah. Yeah, and he was like, I'm
Here's-
gonna quit. I'm gonna go sell bait, and it's like I'm looking at that going, see, that tells us exactly what's wrong is people don't understand that things evolve. And we are actually involved. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Root Gaming. We actually sponsor them directly. We are a hardware sponsor and also work with them on like events coming up. We actually just was talking to them right before I came to this. And they are a very active and one of the reasons I wanted to work with them is they have an awesome community, really solid team, and they have some great players, really good capabilities. So not to mention they have what's called a TT Seed program, which is something that they actually train new and upcoming gamers to be competitive, like kids. So that's
awesome.
really cool for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
because I'm all about teaching new people to game, and that's one of my things is like everyone's like, oh, PC Master Race, console's the devil. I'm like, dude, we need the console to exist, otherwise PC will have a problem because most of these kids are coming up. Their parents aren't going to go out and just buy them a gaming PC.
Yep.
They get into gaming via console, then they realize what they can do with PC, and they progress.
Mm-hmm.
So if console suddenly was to die off tomorrow, it would hurt us, especially us as PC gamers. It would hurt us huge in the long run because a lot of these kids would never be introduced into gaming.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, when it comes down to it, I look at, the future. I mean, I want to see gaming grow because I love gaming. I love what it's all about. And the fact is, if you want to constantly see better games come out, you got to have more gamers ready to eat these games up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, minus the whole DLC and all that crap I hate dealing with. But besides that, I mean, I love PC gaming.
Well, I
And
think
it's.
I was
Go
just
ahead, man,
gonna
go
say, I think the esports will eventually become a thing that everyone's going to understand. Just like someone made the example the other day, like people are complaining about Heroes of the Dorm, which is what it was called, being on ESPN2. They sound just like the people who were complaining about rock and roll music in the 70s and stuff, saying it's not music, blah, 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 blah. And now we look back at it, and it's all that stuff's pretty tame nowadays. So
Well-
it's just it'll have a natural progression. People grew up with video games, are getting to our age, because video games kind of started around, I'm guessing, our time, our age frame. So that means everyone below us probably grew up with some kind of controller in their hand, and especially kids even younger than that are growing up with an iPhone or whatever in their hand too, a tablet of some sort. Eventually it's just going to be, wait, people didn't do that too type of thing. So
Yeah.
Are you calling us old or what?
No.
Come on, man.
I'm saying we're vetted.
What a nice term for old.
Okay.
Hey, it's not like I said I was younger than all of you. I acknowledge what I am.
So I did pull up our $800 build from May 2014, and so
What's
here's
in that?
what it's got. It's an i5 4670K.
Okay.
So it's not the Haswell refresh. It's Haswell proper. It's a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo, an MSI Z87 G43, and if I'm not mistaken, that was SLI capable. I'm not 100% sure on that. Maybe not.
Yeah, it is. It is.
G-Skill Airy Series 8 gigs. So we're still using that today. It's less expensive than it was back then. This also had a Seagate Barracuda 1 terabyte, tried and true. MSI Radeon R9 270X. This is probably the only part that I would change because it's $199 last year. That would be perfect for a GTX 960 today.
Oh, absolutely.
Cooler
And
Master. Sorry, go ahead.
What? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to round it out. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's so far those parts are a perfectly viable set of components to even game today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, most of them are in some of our other builds.
Yeah, and then it's Cooler Master Half 912 and Corsair CX 600. So
Can I just say I'm so glad we got away from that case. That case is uglier than sin. I fucking hate that thing.
Which case is that? I didn't know that.
The half 912 from Cooler Master. It looks like somebody took a shit on a transformer and put a computer in it. I fucking hate that case. And Brandon, I know you love that case. I'm sorry, but I fucking hate it.
He's a fan of the half series. Yeah, so I mean, today that could hold its own pretty well. I hope somebody out there actually has one and can give us some feedback about their experience over the past year with it. But at the time, at least, I thought it was really solid, and it's super close to what we're recommending today. I mean, you're talking about a difference of like Haswell, the original Haswell, and then Haswell Refresh. Really, there's very little bit of a difference. Mostly like thermal interface, for example. I don't know, Shannon, maybe
Yes.
can you talk about that a
Yes.
little bit? I'd appreciate that actually.
Actually, that was kind of one of those things where for a long time, Intel was doing a thermal interface where the IHS, the heat spreader, the silver part you see on top. I keep using terms, realizing a lot of people might not know what that is, but the IHS, the heat spreader on the top of the CPU, was actually soldered into place on the CPU die. So it had really good thermal transfer. But then they're like, oh, we can make this with a thermal paste and stick it on. And if you've ever delidded one, you've seen, especially one of the newer like 4770Ks, the problem is that application's not perfect. All of a sudden, you get this horrible hot spots and things like that. And I mean, you overclock, that next 100 megahertz could raise you, 10 degrees. And then you delid it, redo the thermal paste yourself, which, by the way, void your warranty up front. But I've done probably, who knows, 100 of them at this point. But basically what happens is it allows your temps to go lower, and next thing you know, you're able to make things happen without burning your house down. But then
that's always good.
4790K, Devil's Canyon, basically the refresh, that comes along, and this thing's just beautiful. I mean, it has no thermal issues. It overclocks. The only issue I run into with 4790K is they literally hard wall at a certain point. Like whether you're talking 4.7, 4.8, the only way to get them higher is to actually either bin one if you're running like above ambient cooling, like water cooling or air cooling, or if you're going sub-ambient, you can always push stuff faster.
Yeah.
Because once you're going below ambient temperature, you're basically negating a lot of the possible thermal limitations. Like if you're
Right.
running LN2, you're talking, depending on where the chip cold bugs, you can be all the way down to negative 190 area Celsius, and it removes a lot of limitations you normally run into.
Yeah, I actually like that Mick Ghostpants, the guy that asked this question, has specifically said he's been looking into getting into PC gaming, and people around him have said, "Oh, you'll always be upgrading parts all the time. It's not worth it." Well, we've just taken a build from a year ago, and it's almost the same as our build from today outside the GPU. And my system that I run right now is on a 3770K, 60 gigs of Vengeance, and the only thing that I've changed outside of SSDs for just my own personal, fucking around is GPUs. And I've changed them twice. I went from dual 6870s to dual 60 GTX 660s to a single 970, and I've done that over the course of 3 years. So if you think like, oh, the cost of my GPU is like 4 shitty Halo games, then you're probably gonna.
Hey, you know what? Do you want to November 2012? Listen to this one. i5 3570K, another Hyper 212 Plus.
Still
Sure.
solid.
The
Yeah,
same
that's what I use
board,
now.
same board you're running today, John, is the Gigabyte GA Z77X
Z77X D3H.
Yep. Corsair Vengeance 8 gigs.
Still viable.
It's also a Seagate Barracuda 1 terabyte, probably not
We
the
like
same
those
model.
drives.
No, they're cheap and a lot of storage, 7200 RPM, either 32 or 64 meg cache.
Dan had
and I've
issues
had-
with them. They've been reliable for me. So
I've had good reliability. Video card in that one was a 7870 gigahertz edition, 2 gig. That was 224 for that was November 2012. Again, the half 912 Corsair 500 watt Builder series for $40. And back then we were including optical drives, and they were the bane of my existence because they absorbed $16 out of every build. And Brandon and I argued about it for months until we finally agreed to remove it. I understand some people need an optical drive to install an OS. Please download the ISO and turn it onto a USB drive.
you'll never
It's
do
By
it
the way-
the other way
a
again.
lot faster.
By the way, Bob is super anal about the price. Trust
I am.
me.
And that's accurate. If you had, let's say you just came into KBMOD a year ago and built the $1,300 build, the core of your system is probably still perfectly fine. CPU, motherboard, RAM, hard drives. At this point, you're probably looking at, maybe I want to go to a 9 series GPU from NVIDIA, and you're right back in the game.
Yeah,
That's
actually-
exactly how I did things.
John, the $1,300 build from that is actually your exact build right now. I mean, minus all the SSDs that you've added and now the 970. It was a 670 back then.
Yeah. So back then I used dual 660s as opposed to one 670, but 3770K, gigabyte motherboard, 16 gigs of RAM. At that point, I had 2 solid state drives and a single magnetic hard drive. Like, you could build a system. So here's the way to look at it. If you were going to buy an Xbox One and a PS4, you just built like the $800 to $900 rig, and you can use that core with new GPUs for the next at least 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only
So-
thing right now that kind of throws that argument out is we're shifting from DDR3 to DDR4, so you're not going to be able to carry that over. But
Sure.
how often does that happen? When would DDR2 switch to 3? I don't remember off the top of my head, but
Oh God, at least a build ago. Like when I built from my i7 920
That was a
to
long
this
time
system
ago.
now, I was still on DDR3.
so
Was it 1156? Does that sound right? LGA
1366.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Hold on.
1366.
What do you talk about? DDR2 to DDR3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They actually had DDR3 and P45 and stuff.
Okay.
In X48, they had it.
I think my first was an X58 board. That's what I was thinking. Okay.
So my point being, if you get like your RAM, you can probably hold on to that for a long time, especially if you get DDR4. Your hard drives will last as long as they spin. SSDs
Right.
will probably last a long, long time. Power supplies will last a good amount of time, so you can probably use those for at least 2 or 3 builds. Mine's lasted probably 4, but I also upgrade way too often.
Well,
And then the case, if you're happy with it, you're probably not going to need to upgrade it.
so Shannon's actually got some pretty strong feelings and good insight on reusing power supplies, though, and maybe we should quickly go into that, and then we'll go take another question.
Well, what do you mean? And reusing power supplies across
Yeah.
builds?
Yeah.
Dude, do it. If it matches what you need, totally do it. I mean, power
Definitely.
supplies, as long as you get a good one, you get one with a good 80 plus rating, something that's made out of solid components. good quality manufacturing, dude, you can run it for mini builds. I mean, I know people who are running an original Tough Power 1200. I hear it sometimes where, you're talking something that's 5, 6, 7 years ago, and they're still running it in their current system. It's been through 4 or 5 systems, and it runs fine. I say, you know what, as long as it's working, and I mean, obviously, that's another problem. Just like we were talking about cases, how sometimes cheap out on cases is okay, depending on what you're giving. Well, a lot of people just look at a number on a box and they go, okay, yeah, I can get that power supply because it matches what my spec should be. However, not all power supplies are made the same. Depending on manufacturer, depending on all this stuff, there's a big variance in components used. So you always want to look at what a top quality power supply is and make sure to invest a little bit in that market or in that part of a build, because it's going to make a huge difference as to your experience. And when it comes down to it, without a power supply, nothing works because everything needs a power supply to run.
Right, and that's the part that can kill everything else too.
Oh, definitely. And going back to cases, I've built a lot of machines in cases that cost like $26. They were not. They were like enough of a casing to protect the parts in them.
I think
one of the things that we do in. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say my first case was $20 on Newegg. I still remember it, and it was a piece of crap. But
yeah,
it worked for 2 builds until I finally said, "Oh, I'll spend $50 now."
I built
one
a
of the things
machine
that we
in an
do in
Amazon
these
cardboard box.
Oh yeah, well you've built a system in a cardboard box, which was probably a better case than some of the cases I've used in the past, to be honest.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do in these builds is the cases that we recommend are generally cases, even the fucking half 912 that Brandon loves, is something that you can build in again and again. Yeah. The parts are tooled properly, they fit together well, and they're going to support your parts that you're putting into it. You get a shitty $15 case from some unknown company that is made out of hope and dreams and the thinnest aluminum you've ever seen in your entire life. One, you'll cut yourself on it, guaranteed.
Yes.
And 2, it will not fit your parts properly. It wasn't tooled precisely. It wasn't made to be like, hey, this is going to be a nice computer. It's going to suck at the end. So case is one of those places that you can start to scale back the pricing, but don't completely go to like a $12 case. You will regret it in the long run.
And another thing, too, that I just want to add while we're still on that topic, if you're getting your first PC, please do not get a pre-built one from someone like Dell. If you're so intimidated by building a PC, trust me, I understand. Sometimes we're jaded because we've been dealing with computer parts for a long time that we forget that sometimes just plugging in the little connectors for like your reset switch and stuff to a new person, that might be terribly intimidating. To us, we're like, it's so easy, but if you've never done it before, you might be confused. Whatever. I can understand that you want a pre-built machine. Don't buy a Dell. Go to one that gives you a quality case, a quality power supply, so that way later on, if you want to upgrade, you have quality parts that you can carry over with you. If you have a Dell, you're going to need a new... Well,
there goes that sponsorship. Jesus.
Oh, come on. Wait. Who does not like proprietary connectors that you can connect nothing to?
Sure. No, those are the best.
That's the greatest thing ever.
I love translating pinouts in the event that I want to try to get something else.
The place where I work, they have a lot of pre-built machines, and I have to upgrade them from time to time just because we need more out of them. And having to deal with those cases is a nightmare, and I hate it every single time. It's just they cut pennies wherever they can, which you end up saving money on the front end, kind of, but if you want to eventually upgrade, just don't do it.
All right, so we've got a bunch of questions in chat here specifically on the topic of monitors, which is not something that we generally cover. This is actually the topic that JJ opened with on our panel at PAX East. He talked about how you should start with... Shannon's laughing already because JJ is so verbose and he's got so much information that he wants to share. And there were a bunch of times when we were both looking at each other like, do we need to say anything? No, okay, JJ's got it. But anyway, so he started with let's when you're going to think about a build, start off with like what's your monitor size, what's your resolution. That's going to dictate a whole lot of different stuff.
Sure.
Now, Shannon, you've got a bunch of high-end monitors there. We're seeing questions here for, do you think 27 inches is too big for a monitor? Do you plan on moving to 4K gaming? Personally, I run two 27s, and they're just 1080p. I'd love to have 4Ks, but they're just 1080p right now. You've got a bunch of 1440ps, right?
Yes. I also 4K. Honestly, the thing with 4K is a lot of games don't have textures for them. So even if you're running 4K, all you're doing is literally, it's like similar to like when you upscale from like 1080, right?
Right.
Like you're taking your 1080 pixels and you're just upscaling it to fit the panel, but in reality, those pixels aren't actually being drawn there. There are some games that offer awesome 4K, like Batman has awesome 4K textures, but at the end of the day, it's still something that's it's coming along. But once again, this goes back to the same argument of, are you going to buy onto the early? Do you ever buy the first engine that comes out in a new car? No, you wait a little bit, watch a few of them explode, then you buy the one that's fixed.
Yep.
You give it a little time, let things mature, then you buy the one you really want that's going to be the right way, or at least a better version of the right way, not the very first one that's probably you're gonna be the guinea pig for. And there's just not enough games. It's like buying a card based on the fact that it sports DX12 right now. It just doesn't make sense.
I think if you're going to go into 4K gaming anyway, you're pretty much pigeonholing yourself into either getting a Titan, a 980, or maybe a pair of 970s, a couple of the higher end Radeon cards. But you're basically looking at like a minimum of $600 GPU spend, right?
Yep. I
Well,
mean,
the other thing is with 4K right now, unless you're really going to shell out on the monitor, you're going to probably be locked at 30 hertz, and that's
that's
really
true.
a sin. Like,
That's true.
DisplayPort 1.2 will support it. There's actually a lot of 4K monitors right now. Like even some like there's a local company when I go up to Portland for PDXLAN that there's a company called CTL. They make one that's DisplayPort 1.2, and they're a much smaller company. But at the end of the day, I actually played with it. Super awesome monitor, 60 hertz. I mean, I'm very used to 144 now, so it's kind of weird for me going back and forth. It's like one of those things where I promise never to go back until I have to. But I'll tell you right now, 4K actually can be a little tricky depending on the game you're playing, because if it doesn't have the textures, it actually makes your eyes feel weird, at least to me.
Yeah.
But once again, this comes back to like Bob, we were talking about Oculus.
Yeah.
Some people can look at it no problem. Some people you're gonna puke the first time you try to use the thing.
shut up, Bob. I hate you. I still haven't come to your house to play with that.
Yeah, I know. Hold on, I'm going to put it on right now.
Oh, good. Look as much of a nerd as you possibly can on this cast.
I'm gonna laugh if he throws up on stream. That'll be good.
I'm not going to throw up on stream.
The other thing is, especially with 4K, if you're somebody who uses like a stream PC setup or any kind of external capture card, you're kind of locked into 60 hertz at this point. There's not really a solid consumer level card that will support above 60 hertz in an affordable price range.
Yeah.
So especially above 1080p.
Yeah. So my little input there too, if you're going to stream, because I imagine I stream the most out of all of us here. If you're going to stream, you probably want to stick right now, today, 1080p. You want to be there. I mean, you can downscale, but if you eventually want to cap something, like Hex just said, 1080p capture cards are cheap. If you want to go higher than that, get prepared to spend a lot of money and get prepared for it not to necessarily play well, because you need a lot of power. You probably need a separate streaming machine. Another thing too we capped on was 144 hertz versus 60. Would you rather have a 1440p monitor at 60, or would you rather have 144 hertz at 1080? Me personally, I'd go 144 hertz. But I play like shooters and whatnot, so do you want it to be pretty, or do you want it to be a little bit more smooth? So I don't know.
Counter-Strike for life, man.
Yep.
Counter-Strike for life. That game, 144 hertz, amazing.
It's a completely different game,
makes
right?
a good point. At this point, especially with the major streaming platforms like the one we're on right now, Twitch, you probably don't have the bandwidth either up or down to do 1440p streaming, either a viewer or as a streamer. It's just not viable.
Well,
so
no
if you're thinking of streaming, you're not going to watch it at that regardless. It's going to scale to 1080p either way. But at this point, if you're thinking of streaming, 1080p is your sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even if you had the up to support streaming it up, or had the upstream for it, how many people actually have the down? I mean, yeah, we're blessed in certain parts. Like I'm in Southern California, we have some really awesome internet options, but there's a lot of people I know that still run DSL at like 6 megabit.
Well, and
they're
if
never
you're
going to
streaming to Twitch, they don't want you to stream over 3,500 KB per second. So you want to stream 1440p at 60 FPS at that bit rate? I don't think you do. So you're I stream at 720p 60 FPS. I could do 1080p at 30, but again, most people don't watch this stuff full screen. They watch it in a little window, so they have the chat next to it. I'd rather have it be 60 FPS at 720 versus 1080. So
Yeah. Do you mean they watched that on KBMOD multi-stream, actually?
Of course, everyone uses only
Um,
that website.
that's true.
So there's a question here about the $800 build. Why is that 800 and then the jump is $500 to the 1300? And then there's the $500 build, which is only a $300 jump to the $800 build. Well, that's because we started with just the $800, $1300, and $1800 builds. At the time, we didn't really feel like a $500 build was super viable for gaming. I think this was in, I want to say, 2010.
It's either 10 or 11.
I'll have to see when we started introducing the $500 builds. But there came a point where you actually had a pretty competent machine at $500, and I really felt like Brandon and Dan and I could put our heads together. And John, I don't know if you were involved in KBMOD in general before the $500 build, but we really
As long
felt
as I've
like,
been here, it's been a $500 build.
yeah, I mean, it came to a point where we felt like there was something competent at that level. I mean, sure, you can build a PC that you can use or your mom can use or whatever for $200 or less. Actually, in the coming months, I'm going to talk to Brandon and Dan and see if I can spend some magical internet money and do what I'm going to call the KBMOD dumpster dive, and I'm going to source parts on eBay and Craigslist and Goodwill and see what I can do with about $200.
Sure, why not?
So,
you could do it.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty confident actually. I mean,
You might be running a 9800 GTX, but you could do it.
Yeah.
Dude, I've got one of those. If you want to use that, you can have it. Like I've
I
got
don't
one
know.
here.
I mean, I've seen.
I have a video card you can buy off of me.
Yeah,
Sold to you.
980.
No,
Oh.
unless you want to buy it for what I kind of spent for it, so I can get it.
Well,
done.
The other cool thing about the $500 build is if you, let's say you walked into a Best Buy today and we're like, I'm going to buy a PS4 and a second controller and a game, you're at the $500 build. Like,
Right. So buy the $500 build and then buy a couple humble bundles.
or don't. Just get on
Yeah.
Steam and go to the free-to-play section and play
That's
shit.
true.
And
Yeah.
and you're stuck with AMD APU.
That's true. Team Green.
It's true. Yeah, it's accurate. And the $500 build, so a lot of people have always asked that question too, is, hey, at the $500 build, you could technically go to like an AMD A10 and that would give you slightly better performance than an i3 that we usually recommend. The difference there is when we do something like an i3, we're giving you an upgrade path. So in 6 months down the road, when you're like, oh, the i3 is starting to bottleneck me a little bit, I want to play something newer, you can slot a new i5 or an i7 into that for the cost of like 3 or 4 Xbox.
You know what the not to completely shit on AMD, but the single-threaded performance on an i3 is significantly better than anything in AMD's catalog. Though I did just see some leaks about AMD's future product, supposedly the Zen. Is that right?
The Zen mesh,
Zen.
yeah.
That kind of looks promising. So some of the people are saying that it reminds them of like the old like K8. So we'll have to see.
I hope it's successful because then my Intel chips will be cheaper.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's
and
the
it'll
only reason.
And it'll incentivize Intel to keep going for performance too. Like they're obviously trying to shrink things down, like you see in the mobile space, like the Core M running on like 4.5 watts or whatever.
Right.
That's where everything is going. I mean, we talked about NVMe and how it's like trickled down from data center to your home. Well, they're doing that too in the mobile space. So they're taking like desktop performance and making it require less and less power, and it's going into mobile products. But they don't really have any incentive to increase high performance, high end desktop stuff without competition. So AMD's got to be there.
Yeah.
I just noticed me and Hex both did like the virtual quotations at exactly the same time somehow.
Yeah.
Not sure how that happened. By the way, one of my friends, I do got to say, my buddy Wes actually was watching and he messaged me on Skype. He asked if we actually organized the big beards with the small beards. Because right side's big beard, left side small beards.
Yeah, it kind of is, yeah.
I do what I can.
That's funny. Nice job, Mark.
All right, so we could, the four of us as a think tank could talk about this for probably the next 4 hours. Let's take one more question. We've gone quite longer than we planned to, and then we'll
we
kind of try and wrap
definitely
it up.
Yeah, how about let's take two, but guys, come up with something like really good for Shannon. I mean, you have a wealth of information available in that dude's head. And I mean, I'm certain Shannon will be willing to come on at another time. I don't think anybody's horribly offended him yet. He's kind of hard to offend. I tried. It didn't work so well. He ended up offending me instead.
I'm more
That's not
worried
hard.
about I'm more
I can
worried
do
about
that.
getting kicked off the stream than anything.
Nah.
Now, there are only like 3 trigger words that end up having us.
What are those?
The ones for Bob, it's Democrat is the first one.
Oh, I thought it was mangina. I don't know.
That one's fine. That was fine. All right, so let's go, guys.
All right, so this actually, I like this question quite a lot. Tropics Call asks, why a workstation card over a consumer level card? Is there a benefit over one or the other? And that's not something I think a lot of consumers will understand the difference between like, hey, I want a Fire Pro card in my system versus like an R280 or something like that. Why would you want to go with one over the other?
Okay, so go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so we're talking Fire Pros and Quadros versus R9,
GeForce and
whatever,
R9s.
and GTX. It, well, if you're going to be doing any gaming, I wouldn't recommend either of those workstation type cards. I mean, for one, the cost is insane, but then you're also talking about like floating point precision, right?
Single precision and dual precision performance.
Right. So
that's what they're built around. They're built around literally processing. They are just parallel processing, just populating tons of cores with data and just crunching it. That's what they are designed to do. Games, they're part of that. I mean, you can game on those cards. I've done it. But it's about the biggest waste of money you'll ever do.
Right. But that's also that's the difference between the Titan and the Titan X. Or is it Titan Z and Titan X? Titan X has lower. It's FP64, isn't it?
But regardless of that, basically the Titan was originally introduced as almost like what we'd call a poor man's or a working man's compute card. It had part of the precision literally cut off. It just wasn't available. It was like disabled.
Right.
But it allowed some entry-level compute, CUDA, things like that, much higher than a standard GeForce graphics card. It basically just had a lot more enabled on it than a standard desktop card. But it still had all the gaming performance. So it was like a killer on both sides. However, if you needed the specific like Quadro level performance, you can't replace that with a Titan. It just doesn't exist. You have to have those specifically built cards, whether it's Fire Pro or GeForce or NVIDIA. It really doesn't matter. You're talking comparing apples to oranges really in the real world. If you were to take this and slap this in your desktop, it will work, but your ROI, your return on investment from that card is going to be horrible compared to a desktop gaming card.
Yeah. Right, and that's why when the Titan was originally announced, NVIDIA was calling it the Pocket Supercomputer. Like, this is something that's designed to crunch data. Like, yeah, you could play games on it, but like, hey, are you somebody... So where I work, I get to mess with some of the Tesla cards as they came out, and doing things like Boink computing, for example, for the Steady at Home project. The Tesla cards destroy anything else. And with a Titan, you could do similar things, but compared to like the GTX, I think I have a 285 in one of my workhorse boxes. They're just night and day. So like if you're looking for, hey, I want a pocket data cruncher, that's where a Titan comes in, or something like the Quadras or the Teslas, something not GeForce related.
You have to look at what you're trying to do, because even video stuff, especially with how much I've been using Adobe stuff forever. I used Final Cut a little bit when I had a Mac Pro at my last job, but I mean, my home machine with a gaming card performed better than I think I had a Quadro something in my Mac at work. They just, even I know Video Copilot, if you do any kind of video stuff, they are huge in that industry. A lot of their machines have, I know last time I checked, they had 780 Ti's in them. And they make enough money that they can afford the other cards. If they're not buying them for video work, that's because they're just as good, if not sometimes better, for that kind of stuff, price to performance wise. So it depends on what you're doing. It really depends on what you're doing. Video stuff, I don't see that much of a benefit, and that's where they kind of try to market it that way sometimes, and it's not really the case.
Right. So if you're doing a lot of like 3D CAD and Mark, I think, aren't you doing a little bit of SolidWorks as well?
Yeah, and we've done.
So that's the kind of stuff that Quadros, like and the Fire Pros, that's the kind of stuff that those are geared towards.
Yeah. Well, even
that's their wheelhouse.
Even SolidWorks is, I don't know. We've had one machine that had one of those cards in it, and then I put I think a 970 in that same machine, and it worked pretty similarly. I mean, I didn't see a big performance jump on that, but maybe we weren't pushing the right.
It kind of depends on which model too. What'll happen is they'll charge you a crap load of money for a low-end Quadro because it's a Quadro.
So it really, too long didn't read. It depends on what you're doing. Research it a little bit. Make sure you're not spending money where you don't need to.
It really does have to be relative, though. That's the thing, because if you're talking, like, I've had plenty of workstations where I've seen Quadro cards, and I look at it and I go, wow, this thing really sucks compared to this new desktop card that's, $250. But in reality, that was 2 generations old also. That was a Quadro card.
Yep.
So if you take that same mid-range or even sometimes high-end card versus that Quadro card of the same generation, it's a world of difference. But once again, with the Mercury engine, like in Adobe's a perfect example. With that thing is so well optimized to utilize what desktop graphics cards can do now, especially since OpenCL and like CUDA, things like that are now available. Now all these different APIs are available for this stuff to work on, allows it to be a performance monster compared to a few years ago. These APIs just weren't open to the desktop graphics cards. They were just coming out of infancy or didn't even exist.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and they said they wouldn't. You had to trick Adobe, and to even be able to use the CUDA cores originally, you had to like edit a text file, which they made easy, but they didn't. They didn't want to support it because it's not as reliable as a Quadro card. I will give it that. So if you're doing it day to day, sometimes you want the reliability over the performance, or you're willing to spend the extra to have the performance equal each other and it be more reliable. So,
and the thing is, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is this is the same thing like the market for Xeons. A lot of these desktop processors, people go, well, why can't I overclock a server? I do IT stuff at Thermaltake. I can tell you, I don't want to overclock server because I don't want to deal with the data corruption or anything else. The same thing happens with these productivity machines that have 2, 3, 4 quadros in them. They are working on, time is money with these things. So if you corrupt one project and you've got to restart it, and let's say it's a 10-hour project, and let's say you're 6 hours through it, all of a sudden you just lost that 6 hours of productivity just because you got a desktop card. You know what? Not such a good idea anymore.
Yep.
Right.
So when you're talking professional workspaces, these guys say, you know what? Screw it. We're going to be making a lot of money off of this product. Spend the higher amount. All be damned, and just, move forward and know that thing's going to be dead stock reliable every time you use it.
Right, absolutely. Especially in like a research environment or a place where it's like, hey, you know what? We can spend $380 or $600 on whatever desktop line GPU that you're looking at, or we can spend $2,500 on something like a Tesla card. But we know that Tesla card is going to get us through a straight up 48-hour computational biology session, and it's never going to miss a beat. We're going to get absolutely accurate results. And yeah, we spent maybe 3 times what that card was, but we know that those are scientifically accurate data that came out of that card. So like at work where I'm at, I had a 285 and the Tesla, I think the K400 or the K4000, whichever card it was, and we were running just some of the CUDA benchmark tools that came with that card. And there's a smoke simulation that on the Tesla runs like shit. Like it runs terrible. It's about 14 frames a second. And if you switch it over to something as old as a 285, it's a smooth, beautiful, like volumetric smoke at 60 frames a second. But who the fuck cares? Like when you're doing things like computational biology, it doesn't matter that the graphic was really pretty. It matters that the results we got were perfect and they were exact.
Yep.
So that's why you would buy, and short term, that's why you would buy something like a Tesla or a Fire Pro or whatever versus like an R9 or a GTX 980.
If you're asking the question, though, you probably don't need it, to be honest.
No, and actually, the gentleman that asked that, or gentleman or lady that asked that question said, "Hey, I had a professor or at my school that bought this K4000 to go with his new X99 build, and I had no idea why he would spend that money on a GPU when things like the 980 or the Titan Z exist or the Titan X, and that gave him the reason why." So there you go.
Cool. Well, I think we're hitting midnight here, East Coast. We probably should start wrapping it up. So first of all, I would like to thank Shannon for taking the time to talk with us, talk with everybody here. Guys, please make sure to follow him on Twitter. It is punks with an X 223. Is that right?
Yep, and it's on your screen right now.
It's on your screen right there.
Aha. And he is also in chat. But anyway, he is your go-to man for all things Thermaltake and professional overclocking as well. So
thanks very much for joining us.
He's also joined our forum and is relatively active there too. So if you have questions, you can post them on our forum for Shannon or in the comments for this VOD later when we post it on the site. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to say?
No, I think the builds were solid this week, and it's good to see nothing like jump up in price, because every once in a while that happens. Like RAM didn't double in price this month, so
Yeah.
that's always
Yeah.
good.
So a lot of times RAM is the biggest part.
Yeah, or
Go build a
motherboards
computer,
that are,
nerds.
motherboards that are on sale and suddenly out of stock. That's the bane of my existence. So,
Yeah, and graphics cards that disappear on the last second.
yeah,
Right. Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
that was weird. So, okay, well, thanks everybody. Have a great night. Appreciate the views. Make sure to follow KBMOD Gaming. You can follow us on all of our Twitter handles above there. And
We'll
yeah.
see you next month.
All right. See you later, guys. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, guys.
When all of your wind has gone and all of the paths you've drawn have sunk to the ocean sand where no one can see you stand. Don't let the dark embrace, cower the dreams you chase under the rust and blood. Don't let yourself